I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Pakistan.
Mr. President, please accept our felicitations on assuming the presidency of the 79th session of the General Assembly. We thank you also for convening this resumed 10th emergency special session of the General Assembly in response to the requests of the Arab, the OIC, and the non-aligned movement. My delegation aligns with the statement made by the ambassadors of Cameroon on behalf of the OIC and of Uganda on behalf of the non-aligned movement. Mr. President, the purpose of this emergency session is to translate into action the historic and comprehensive advisory opinion delivered by the International Court of Justice on 19 July 2024 on the legal consequences of Israel's policies and practices in the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem. Pakistan has co-sponsored the draft resolution contained in document ES 10/L31 Rev 1, presented with its enhanced rights by the State of Palestine, which seeks to implement the conclusions of the ICJ. Mr. President, the tragic history of Palestine and its people has been caused by a series of legal and political decisions imposed by colonial and imperial powers. From the Balfour Declaration, the epitome of political betrayal, to the Anglo-American decision to allow Jews persecuted by the Nazis to emigrate to Israel, to the plan to partition Palestine embodied in the ignominious Resolution 181 adopted by this Assembly despite the just Arab and Islamic opposition, to the precipitate admission of Israel to the United Nations. Pakistan's founding father, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, warned in 1948 that Israel's creation would have grave consequences for the peoples of the region. History is witness to these consequences. A state foisted on the land of the Palestinians, the brutal expulsion of the Palestinians in the Nakba, an expansion of the illegal state, the complete occupation of all of Palestine by Israeli military aggression in 1967, a brutal occupation which has lasted 50 years, the steady acquisition of Palestinian lands, properties, and homes to accommodate illegal and aggressive Jewish settlers, the imposition of a segregated apartheid rule in occupied Palestine, the unlawful incarceration of thousands of Palestinians subjected to torture, deprivation, and humiliation, the 30-year siege of Gaza, and now the frequent violations visited on innocent Palestinians, including indiscriminate aerial and land bombardment, killing thousands of mostly women and children, which is now writ large in the ongoing genocide in Gaza, where 41,000 Palestinians have been killed and almost 100,000 injured. A conflict which threatens to spread across and engulf the entire Middle East. Mr. President, against this grim background, the ICJ's advisory opinion marks a milestone of justice, an expression of equity, and a flame of hope. The ICJ's conclusions emphasize that Israel's occupation of the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza, and its attempts to prolong the occupation and its security policies violate two basic principles of international law. One, the right of peoples to self-determination, and two, the principle of non-acquisition of territory by the use of force. In accordance with the ICJ's advisory opinion, the draft resolution demands that Israel immediately, completely, and unconditionally withdraw from the occupied Palestinian territories, immediately put an end to its unlawful policies and procedures, make reparation for damages caused, comply with the ICJ's orders, and ensure that the Palestinian people can exercise their right to self-determination without impediment. The draft resolution also underlines the need to hold Israel accountable for its violations of international law and to bear the consequences of all its wrongful actions, including by making reparations for injury and damage caused through the establishment of an international mechanism and an international register of damage. Mr. President, importantly, the ICJ's advisory opinion also indicates the obligations of member states in relation to Israel's occupation. Accordingly, the draft resolution inter alia calls on member states in compliance with their obligations to promote Palestinian self-determination, to refuse to recognize any change in the institutional structure and status of the occupied territory, and not to recognize or provide aid or assistance in maintaining Israeli occupation. Furthermore, the draft resolution calls on international organizations, including the United Nations, not to recognize as legal the situation arising from Israel's illegal occupation. The Secretary General has also been asked to submit a report on the implementation of this resolution within 3 months. Mr. President, the adoption of the draft resolution before us will require a re-evaluation of the position of member states and the United Nations, especially the Security Council, with regard to Palestine. First, this should reinvigorate the efforts of the international community to oblige Israel to halt its genocidal military campaign in Gaza and its operations in the West Bank, and to withdraw its forces forthwith from there. Second, those states which are continuing to provide military and material support to Israel must halt this in accordance with their obligation not to help in perpetuating Israeli occupation. Third, we must take concrete steps to enable the Palestinians to exercise their right to self-determination. One important step is to admit the State of Palestine as a full member of the United Nations. Another would be to convene the International Conference on Palestine to advance the two-state solution. Mr. President, Pakistan will actively promote the realization of the objectives and decisions arising from the ICJ's advisory opinion and the adoption of the draft resolution in document L31 Rev 1. Pakistan's solidarity with the Palestinian people predates the independence of our own country. We realized independence through the exercise of self-determination. On 14 August 47, our founding father, Quaid-e-Azam, stated, and I quote, "No nation, no people who are worth living as a nation can achieve anything great without making great sacrifice, such as the Arabs of Palestine are making." In 1948, he pledged to aid the cause, I quote, "of the Arabs in Palestine in every possible way." Mr. President, we have lived up to that commitment, and we will continue to live up to that commitment. The opinion of the ICJ and the adoption of the draft resolution before us will be one decisive step towards ending the suffering of the Palestinian people. Inshallah, Palestine will soon be free. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Pakistan.